Welcome. This is Stories Lost, bringing you another episode that delves deeper into the unexplained and the uncanny. In this episode, we touch upon two Scandinavian cases where decent people just happen to stumble onto something outlandish. Through their eyes, we'll uncover moments of high strangeness. Each story we cover on our channel is unique, but a familiar thread often emerges. An honest, everyday person, well regarded in their community, is confronted with something they can't explain. They share what they saw, not for attention or gain, but simply because it happened. What common sense and intuition tells them is then tested by well-intended rationalistic constructs, some founded in material reality and others founded in the prevailing social order. But intuition and common sense are not that easily dispelled. Memories, perceptions, and embodied experiences are sometimes too strong to be explained away. And perhaps this tells us that we should not be so quick to make those post-fact judgments. But like always on Stories Lost, feel free to make up your own mind. We begin with a September evening in 1965. Emil and Ada Carlson, your typical respected couple living near Arboga, just happened to look at the sky, only to see a silent, boat-like craft gliding by, full of human-like figures dressed in dyed, stenciled, almost absurdly colorful clothing. And as if that wasn't strange enough, these figures stared back at them, as if sizing up the scene below before the craft drifted off into the night, leaving the Carlsons to wonder if they'd just stepped into some surreal dream or nightmare. Then we move to the summer of 1965 in the forests of Luumäki, Finland. What started as a strange encounter witnessed by Tapani Kuningas's family would change his life forever. Though Tapani himself didn't see anything out of the ordinary, the event left a deep impression on him. Born in 1945 during his family's wartime evacuation, Tapani spent his childhood in Luumäki before pursuing studies in adult education and international politics in Tampere. However, his academic path was soon overshadowed by his fascination with the unknown, particularly UFO phenomena, which became his life's work. One September evening in 1965, Emil and Ada Carlson witnessed an extraordinary aerial vehicle passing at low altitude over their home near Oscarsburg on the outskirts of Arboga. In the vessel, which had a boat-like shape, stood 20 to 25 people looking down at the couple. It was September 29th, 1965, at 6:30 p.m. when this happened, the Carlsons recounted. Since it was such an astonishing event, we noted some of the details in our calendar. We were on our way across the yard when our gaze was somehow drawn upward. What struck us was the peculiar shape of the craft, the absence of engine noise, and the fact that it was filled with people looking down at us. It most resembled the hull of a boat, but without any keel, mast, or other equipment, like an elongated bowl with the ends slightly raised. The size was about that of a bus, and the hull was grayish and quite unattractive. However, the people's clothing was much more colorful. The craft was surrounded by a faint glow, which may have made the whole scene appear so detailed. The craft passed completely silently and at a low altitude, diagonally over the Carlsons from south-southeast to north-northwest for a period of 3 minutes. Nothing obstructed the view of the object. The weather was clear, calm, and nearly cloudless, Emil Carlson recalled. If I try to compare the altitude with the church tower here in Arboga, the airship was about 50 meters higher. The church tower is around 60 meters. It couldn't have been higher or farther away, as we could clearly see so many details. That's why we were so struck by the absence of any engine noise, as it passed so close by. There were no neighbors within earshot that we could call out to, and we couldn't leave to alert others to the phenomenon. We just stood there, watching the strange vessel and wondering what would happen. In the craft, 20 to 25 beings stood close together, looking out. We could only see the upper bodies of these people. Their faces were like those of ordinary folks, but they wore no head coverings. The odd thing was their clothing, which was as colorful as the rainbow. The style of the clothing reminded me of modern rainwear in bright colors. Emil continues. When the craft was directly above us, We could see its full width with all the people inside. It slowly moved toward the north-northwest. As it moved away from our direction, the back end, so to speak, turned toward us. It didn't vanish suddenly, but drifted off at a slow, steady pace. In total, I'd estimate we saw it for 3 minutes. Ada says, "Well, it didn't look like a flying saucer. Maybe it was some kind of tourist from another world." I felt relieved when it passed without landing, as it was quite unsettling. Were these tourists from another world? Ada's remark leads to deeper questions about the nature of that evening and how we perceive such encounters. The distinction between a traveler and a tourist holds weight here, suggesting differing levels of intention and engagement. Were these figures part of a pantheon of cosmic travelers seeking genuine exploration, or simply tourists passing by, observing from a distance? Were these being on a galactic tour, a curated journey, detached and managed? Paul Fussell once described mass tourism as the end of proper travel, a practice that reduces authentic experiences to orchestrated events. Should we consider these actions as part of a larger detached spectacle, or view them as true attempts at interaction? How close to the truth do you believe Ada was when she compared the beings to tourists? Now for our second case, this one from Finland. Sometimes, just being on the fringes of an event can alter the entire course of a life. For Tapani Kuningas, one of the founders of the UFO Finland Association, his journey into the unknown began not with direct contact, but with an extraordinary incident witnessed by his family. Though he himself saw nothing unusual, the accounts of that day remained a significant influence on his perspective and interest in the unexplained. In his writings and interviews, he has revisited this moment, reflecting on how it shaped his approach to unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP. Reflecting on these mysteries, Kuningas has often emphasized the importance of caution and preparation. "The final proof may come at any time," he stated in a newspaper interview in 2001, "or it may never come." Contact with a higher civilization would still be a crippling shock to humanity today. Perhaps we should wait until we find them ourselves, through our own efforts. In his book Ufoja Suomen taivaalla, or UFOs in the Finnish Sky, which he published in 1970, Tapani recounts those fateful events that would spark a lifelong interest. Personally, I have never seen any kind of unidentified flying object, or even less any UFO pilots. But I did once come close to seeing a humanoid myself, right at the scene of an encounter where my father and brother were observing a strange being. A little green man. The incident took place in Luumäki on August 19, 1965, around 12 p.m. That beautiful late summer day, we had set out to pick blueberries in a forest near the village of Hermunen in Luumäki. There were 4 of us: my father, my mother, my brother, and myself. I don't remember seeing or hearing anything unusual, even though, at the time, I was very close to my brother, who would come to follow this strange display for about half an hour, without saying a word to me about it. I'm still puzzled as to why I didn't witness anything, as when I pick berries, I usually don't pay much attention to my surroundings and focus solely on collecting berries. In addition to the humanoid, a strange stone was also seen in the forest, something that had never been noticed in that place before, nor after the event. My father, whose name was Matti Kuningas and who was 55 years at the time, described this peculiar stone as follows. I saw the stone for the first time. It was a bit odd and caught my attention immediately. There was no stone like it there before. To me, it felt alive. It was somehow standing out. I approached it slowly until I was about 30 meters away. The stone was covered with moss, as stones typically are, and there was also a small rowan tree on top, swaying slightly in the wind. Otherwise, this stone stood out from normal stones, as it had a greener hue, maybe even more so than typical forest stones. I thought, well, a stone is a stone, but it did surprise me quite a bit. It was about half a meter high and a bit over a meter long. Then a breeze came to that spot, and there was a sound of trembling aspen leaves, even though there were no aspens there. The air was calm and warm for an August midday. After a moment, the man appeared. He came from near the stone and walked past me without looking at me. As he passed by, he muttered to himself, "Oh, oh," repeating it quite often. He was about a meter tall, or slightly over, a shepherd boy's size. I wondered what this boy was doing, running around and groaning. He was dressed as if in a protective suit, green in color. He had a pointed hat on his head, like something out of today's space gear. I didn't notice any footwear as separate pieces, but the suit seemed to be a single unit, made of the same material from top to bottom. Then he suddenly turned in my direction, changed his running path, and came closer. He looked directly at me, right in the eyes. He was now very close, only about 15 meters away. For a brief moment, he stared at me, and I could see his face. His face was almost like a regular human face, but he looked younger in some ways, though his expression made him seem older. He didn't look like a child at all. His face had a strong carrot-orange tint to it. He watched me intently for what felt like a minute. Then he turned around and started running away. About 50 meters away, he disappeared from sight. The way he vanished was quite odd. It was like he somersaulted backward and was suddenly gone. Now here's how my brother, Tovo Kuningas, 31 years old, described the same events. First, there was a strong wind in one spot on the hill about 200 meters away. Trees were swaying violently in that place. It was like a small whirlwind or storm. I was puzzled about why the wind was blowing like that, especially on such a clear day. I checked the time. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. I thought there was something strange going on. Then the wind stopped. There was no visible change, but then I started to hear what sounded like a human voice talking. I couldn't make out any words. After a while, the voice stopped. I continued picking berries but kept glancing in that direction, wondering if there was anything unusual. Then, I noticed a strange stone about 2.5 meters high and 3 or 4 meters in diameter. Next to the stone stood a small man, just a couple of meters from the stone. He looked carefully in our direction, seeming to look down toward us from behind the stone. He seemed to be about chest height to me and had something resembling a box, or perhaps something smaller, on his chest. Then he started walking directly toward us. I thought he was going to come right up to us. He got to about 50 meters away and then changed direction. He was walking briskly or even jogging. He was wearing a green suit. His skin was reddish, like in a carrot. His feet looked black. They appeared to be about a meter in length. His head was quite large and his ears were wide. He ran towards the edge of the swamp and disappeared there in a strange way. When he came closer, I saw something flash when he was nearby. But I couldn't look in his direction. A strange force was there. At the moment he ran towards the swamp edge and disappeared. I felt like I wanted to go and look, but I couldn't move at all. My brain was working fine, but I was just frozen there. In my nose, I could smell something strange, as if he was there nearby. For a long time, there were odd sounds coming from above me, but soon, the figure was no longer visible. The phenomenon had lasted about half an hour, and then vanished around 2:30. About half an hour later, as I was preparing to leave, I began reflecting on the incident and felt that I should go back and take another look at the stone. I crouched down but saw no signs, no footprints, no paths or marks. I wondered if that rock might not be natural, even though it had all the characteristics of an ordinary one. It was grayish, with moss and a small rowan bush growing on top. I looked around, and I saw that there were no blueberries picked from the ground. That rock felt suspicious to me all the time, like maybe I should approach it with a berry basket and see what it really was. But when I started towards it, some strange force turned me in a different direction, and I had to step away from the rock. Then I thought, maybe I'll just leave it alone. But I couldn't do that either, as I had to get into my car and thought it was best to say something about this man to others, but I soon forgot everything. When I was back at the car, I dismissed it from my mind. I went home, looked at the date. It was the 19th. The event stayed on my mind, but for some reason, I didn't tell anyone. That day simply passed, and Tapani remained none the wiser. However, the time eventually came when his brother finally opened up to him. About half a year later, my brother told me about the incident. He had thought that no one else had seen the humanoid. However, it turned out that my father had also observed the same events, but for some reason, he hadn't mentioned anything about it before. Neither my mother nor I saw the humanoid, We were too focused on picking blueberries. My mother did wonder why my father and brother had so few blueberries compared to us. We didn't notice anything particularly unusual about the mysterious rock or the strange sounds. Why? I believe the camouflage was perfect. In this episode, we've shared the stories of everyday people, a respected couple in Sweden and a Finnish family who encountered the inexplicable. No attention-seeking, no embellishments, just their honest accounts. A silent craft filled with figures, a strange little green man, an uncanny stone, and the lingering sense that some mysteries won't let up. These become experiences we're drawn to share, not out of rational obligation, but because common sense won't let us ignore it. If you liked this dive into the strange and the unexplained, give us a follow, hit the bell, and give us your take in the comment section. The files we pulled for this episode come from UFO Information, 1974, issue number 4, and Tapani Kuninga's book, UFOs in the Finnish Sky.